The noonday heat was bearing down on Blackwater Springs when Jude Martin rode past the old Dusty Rose Saloon. His horse ambled along, much like Jude himself, a man of few words with a weary gaze and a long shadow of the past. He disliked crowds, never got into fights, but always looked people in the eye when trouble struck. But today, he saw something no man should ever have seen. In the scorching sun, tied to a massive wooden post in front of the saloon, was a young woman. Her hands were bound behind her back, her dress was dusty, and a sign hung around her neck with the scorched inscription, "Payment for the game." The crowd around the saloon paid her no mind. Some laughed, some spat in her direction. A boy threw clumps of dirt at her. The girl looked about 20, maybe younger. Her skin was sunburned, her lips cracked, her eyes resembled still water. All warmth had long since left them. "Who is that?" Jude asked an old man by the hitching post. The old man chuckled as if he'd heard a funny joke. "That's Laura Miller, Sam Miller's daughter. You might have heard of him, the one who gambled away his ranch overnight and sold his own horse for a shot of whiskey. Well, he lost her, right at that table." Jude slowly turned to the girl. She wasn't looking at anyone, as if waiting for it all to end. "And this is normal here?" Jude asked quietly. "In these parts?" The old man snorted. She was part of the debt, Sam said, like either money or something fresher, so he decided his daughter was the best investment. Laura didn't resist. She didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't beg. It all happened at night. Her father gambled like a madman, tearing cards, getting angry. Then he pointed at her and shouted, "Take her if my luck's run out." The men at the table exchanged glances, and no one doubted him. They dragged her to the saloon at dawn when everything was a blur, vomit, dust, tobacco smoke. And then they tied her up, put her on display. On the sign, clear even, as if it were about cattle, "Payment for the game." No one stood up, not the market women, nor the mayor, nor the preacher. Some just turned away, as if from a dead animal, but not Jude. He lived alone on the edge of the county after losing his wife in a fire 2 years ago. Since then, he hadn't gone into town unless he had to, hadn't looked people in the eye. But something about that girl, with her burned skin and silent despair, pierced him sharply, like a jagged knife. He didn't know what to say, just stood there and watched. Laura raised her eyes to him, not pleading, not full of tears, direct, stubborn. In them lived the last spark, not of hope, but of fury. A deep, cold fury at the entire world. That evening, everyone who was accustomed to drinking and laughing at filth gathered in the saloon. The owner of the establishment, fat Frank Delaney, wiped sweat from his brow and declared, "Gentlemen, Sam Miller's debt has not been canceled. He left, but the girl remained, so whoever pays gets her, all by the rules." The crowd guffawed. Someone tossed a coin, someone slapped Frank on the back. But at that moment, the door creaked open. Jude entered. He didn't take off his hat, didn't smile. He simply walked up to the bar, took a pouch from his saddlebag, and threw it onto the counter. The coins clinked. Gold, real gold. "This is for her," Jude said quietly. Frank squinted. "Are you serious? Do you know how much you're paying for her?" "It's all I have," Jude replied. "But she has no one else to pay." Frank shrugged and waved his hand. "Take her, just don't regret it later." The crowd fell silent. No one laughed. Jude walked out, slowly, as if he was carrying not a girl out of a fire, but his own past. He approached Laura, cut her ropes. She swayed but didn't fall. He offered his shoulder. She didn't lean on it. "Who are you?" she asked hoarsely. "No one," he said, "but now you are not merchandise." No one stopped them from leaving. Even the drunken sheriff's deputies remained silent, as if afraid to disturb something ancient, something important. As if, for the first time in a long time, something right had been done in the town. But there was more to come. Much more. Because no one knew where Sam Miller had gone. And why Jude had a revolver in an old box under his saddle, one that hadn't seen the sun in a long time, but was polished to a shine. And no one suspected that this wasn't a purchase. It was a war. The horse walked slowly along the dusty road as the sun dipped toward the horizon. Jude remained silent, and Laura rode beside him, asking no unnecessary questions. Her wrists were abraded, her face sunburned, but her gaze remained dry. Even when he offered her water, she drank carefully, as if she couldn't believe any of this was real. They stopped for the night under a lone willow, a mile from the main road. Jude unrolled his sleeping bag, cooked some beans, and silently placed a tin plate in front of Laura. "Thank you," she whispered, and for the first time looked at him differently, not like a stranger, but like a last line of defense. "Was your father always like that?" he asked after a long silence. She nodded. "He gambled, ever since I can remember. Mama died of a fever when I was 8. Sam said I was now his luck. Only I didn't bring him any. The older I got, the more often he said I should start giving back. I scrubbed floors, cleaned the saloon, then he started taking me to evenings with his friends. Last night he lost his last goat, then me." Her voice didn't tremble. But Jude clenched his fist until his knuckles turned white. An old pain stirred in his chest, a feeling he had suppressed for so long. His wife died in a fire caused by a banker's negligence, and then that same banker came to seize their land, citing overdue papers. Jude couldn't do anything then. He wasn't ready. But now he was. "Do you know where he is now?" he asked. "They said he went to Bendel. He's a gambler from Silver Creek. Sam thought he had one last chip up his sleeve." "We'll go there in the morning," Jude said quietly. "Why, I'm not his anymore. You bought me." He looked at her. "You don't buy people, Laura, and for this, he'll pay." They reached Silver Creek 2 days later. The rain had been drizzling since morning, and thick mud lay in the streets. The town was larger than Blackwater, but no kinder. Here, those who cheated best grew rich. It was here, in the Queen of Spades gambling house, that Laura saw her father. Sam Miller sat at a table disheveled in someone else's coat. There were no cards in his hands, just a bottle by his elbow. He didn't notice them at first. Only when Jude approached and threw a ring on the table, a wedding ring, old, clearly a woman's, did Sam look up. "What the?" he grumbled, and then he saw Laura. She stood as if carved from marble, not a step forward, not a step back. Only her lips trembled. "Why'd you come here, girl? I told you, you shouldn't—" Sam stood, swayed, grabbed the edge of the table. Jude calmly pulled a paper from his saddlebag. "This is a relinquishment of rights to the ranch. I bought it with gold. I also paid your debt in Blackwater, but you owe something else." "Me?" Sam laughed drunkenly. "I don't owe you anything, stranger." "Number, you owe her." Jude nodded to Laura. "And this is your last chance to be a man, not a rat." Sam straightened up, his pupils narrowed. He pulled out a pistol, old, cracked. He raised it slowly with a trembling hand. And at that same second, Jude moved. One step, and the pistol was knocked away. Sam himself was on the floor, and Jude held him by the collar of his shirt. "You won't get a second chance," he whispered through gritted teeth. "Not here. Not anywhere else." He let him go, didn't hit him, didn't break him, just turned and walked out. Laura followed him without looking back. On the outskirts of town, in an old barn Jude rented from an acquaintance, they spent the night. Laura sat by the fire, examining the wedding ring, the one he had thrown on the table to Sam. "Did this belong to your wife?" she asked. "Yes. I couldn't save her when the fire started. The banker made us sign papers. Then he sold our house for debts. I went to the mountains, and every time I came back, I remembered that I hadn't done anything." "But now you have," Laura said. Jude nodded. "Now I have." In Blackwater, they were already talking about them. That the quiet cowboy was back, that he had a girl with him, that he hadn't sold her, hadn't hidden her, hadn't abandoned her, but had brought her back with a ring on her finger, not as payment, but as a choice. Frank Delaney watched them from the saloon window. Anger flickered in his eyes. He wasn't used to his deals being overturned, and he certainly wasn't used to women put to shame, returning with their heads held high. "We'll see, Cowboy, who pays here," he whispered, wiping his hands on his apron. But Jude knew this wasn't the end. As long as Frank held the town in fear, as long as women remained silent and men averted their eyes, justice was the business of one man. And that man was now him. Laura hammered nails into the doorframe of the old house on the slope, which had stood empty and rotting before. Now it smelled of life again, wood shavings, cooked beans, and the dust of hope. Jude busied himself at the well, laying a water pipe. They spoke little but understood everything. A week passed. Everything was too quiet, until one night, when the wind whipped dust across the yard and rain beat against the roof, 3 riders approached the house. Jude walked out onto the porch unarmed. But he knew, those who come at night aren't for conversation. "Jude Fraser!" the first one shouted. Broad-shouldered, in a black coat, hat pulled low over his eyes. "That's me. Hand the girl back and forget you ever saw her. Otherwise, you're a dead man." From inside, the floorboards creaked. Laura emerged, wrapped in a woolen blanket. She didn't tremble. She didn't hide. "Tell Frank," Jude said calmly. "If he sends his jackals to me again, I'll dig a grave for him next to those you brought. Now leave." The words hung in the air like taut strings. One of the riders reached for his holster. And then something clicked. Jude held a Winchester hidden behind the doorframe. He wasn't aiming, just holding it. That was enough. The 3 turned their horses and rode away without looking back. The next day, Sheriff Lawson came himself. It was clear this mission didn't please him. "I'm not here for trouble, Jude. But you're being summoned to court. Frank filed a complaint about an assault, and about—" He hesitated. "The unlawful detention of a woman he considers his debtor." "The woman's name is Laura Miller," Jude replied firmly, "and she's free. The debt was bought out. I'm ready to testify to that before a jury." The sheriff nodded. "Only Frank isn't one to lose in court. He pays them, and he tried to buy me. And I came here to say I'm not for sale anymore. I have a daughter. If I bend now, tomorrow she'll be chained up under the saloon. I'll be a witness." The trial was quick, but not easy. Frank Delaney entered the courtroom like a man accustomed to holding the town in his fist. In the hall sat women, some with bruises, some with downcast eyes. Almost all of them knew what debt meant in Frank's interpretation. "Gentlemen of the jury," Delaney's lawyer boomed, "we are dealing with a runaway girl, sold by contract. Our client paid money for her, and now she is being held by force." Laura stood up, in a dress she had sewn from old scraps of canvas. Her face was clean, calm. "I am not property," she said. "No one asked me when I was placed at the saloon. But the man who cut the ropes from me didn't hit me, didn't touch me, didn't harm me. He gave me a choice, and I chose freedom. I am not a debt." Silence fell. Then Sheriff Lawson stood up. "In 20 years of service, I've seen Delaney turn women into slaves. I've turned a blind eye. I've signed papers, but no more. Everything Jude said is true. Everything Laura said is even more terrifying. I swear on it." Frank leaped up. "You wouldn't dare! You buy girls from the back alleys and sell them on the road. You're all like that." The judge struck his gavel. "That's not an argument, Mr. Delaney. That's a tantrum." Jude didn't even smile when the jury unanimously found Laura free and Delaney guilty of extortion, threats, and human trafficking. As Frank was led to the wagon, he spat, screamed, rambling about justice. "You didn't win, Cowboy. You're just one man." Jude looked at Laura. She was looking at him with burning eyes. "One?" he said. "Not anymore." The town went on, but the air had changed. Laura opened a small workshop near the old market. She sewed, taught girls. Those who were afraid to even leave their homes started coming to her. One brought her daughter, another, a friend. Cowboys now knew, if you touch a woman without her consent, Jude will come. The sheriff wore his badge without shame again. The old teacher became a judge, and it all began not with a shootout, but with one quiet man who walked up to a girl tied to a post and said, "Her debt is mine," and from that day on, her debt became freedom. Almost a year had passed. The wind on the prairie was still the same. pungent with the taste of dry grass and distant rain. But the town of North Hills was no longer the same, as if someone had ripped out the rotten planks from its foundation and rebuilt it. Laura walked down the street without fear. She was recognized now. That's her, the one. Some spoke with respect, some with caution, and some with gratitude, especially the women. She opened the Road School, named it not for poetry, but for truth. Because all her students came from somewhere on the road. Some had a black eye, some had a child in their arms, some just a gaze full of ashes. Jude visited often, silently, to bring planks, to fix the roof, to board up a window after another attempt to throw a stone. He was there when needed, and didn't interfere when she wanted to go alone. He still didn't talk much, but now his silence was comforting. One evening, as the sun was setting behind the hills and the air seemed golden, a rider pulled up to the workshop. He didn't take off his hat, didn't tether his horse, but simply stopped at the porch and shouted, "Hey, Jude!" Delaney's back. The silence broke like a thread in the wind. "From prison?" Jude asked. "He got early release, bribed the warden, heard he's coming here, and he's not alone. About 6 men with him, rumor has it. Said the town would remember who ruined his life." Laura stood. A sewing needle trembled in her hands. Jude walked over and gently took her fingers in his, firmly, reliably. "We're not hiding," he said softly. "Neither you nor I." Night fell quickly. The sheriff gathered volunteers who were ready to defend the town. Among them were former drunkards, boys with rifles, and even 3 women, Laura's students, who held weapons with confidence. Jude stood by the road, alone. He didn't want to fight, but he knew this wasn't about choice. It was about the price. "I'm alone," he said aloud into the darkness, "but it's enough." From the darkness, Frank Delaney rode out. His face was thin, as if dried by rage. Behind him, 6 armed, angry, frightened men. "Get out of the way, Fraser," Frank growled. "Today the town is mine again." "No," Jude replied. "Today the town belongs to itself." At that moment, people began to appear from all sides. On the roofs, archers with bows in the windows, women with rifles in the shadows, teenagers with homemade slingshots. Laura emerged from the school, stood next to Jude. With her, dozens. For the first time in a year, Frank saw fear, but not in the eyes of others, in his own. "You wouldn't dare," he began. "You wouldn't dare," Laura cut him off. "Not again." Frank flinched for his weapon, but one of his men stepped back. The second dropped his rifle. The third just turned his horse and rode away. The others followed. He was left alone. He pulled out his revolver and aimed it at Jude. A shot rang out, but Jude didn't move, because the bullet was never fired. Frank's hand trembled. He couldn't pull the trigger. He fell to his knees, laughing hysterically. "You killed me," he whispered. "Not with bullets, but with this. This look." Frank Delaney went back behind bars, this time by the decision of the townspeople. The sheriff personally escorted him to the wagon, and when that wagon rolled away, the people silently applauded, but not out of malice, but because it was the end of an old era. The next day, Laura stood on the school porch. In her hands, a cup of tea. Jude came out to her, sat on the step. "You stayed, even when it would have been easier to leave." He shrugged. "You came back, even though it would have been easier to disappear." They were silent. Then Laura said, "I know who I was. I know who they tried to make me, but now I know who I am." Jude looked at her, like a man who, for the first time in many years, understood the meaning of the word home. "And who are you?" She turned to him, free, and one who no longer remains silent. He nodded. "Then we're headed the same way." They didn't marry immediately, didn't build a ranch in the first month, didn't give vows. But every day he came to her with nails, planks, and bread. And she, with a warm gaze and a story she told to other women. And the town of North Hills changed. Because once a woman tied to a post outside a saloon heard a quiet voice. "Her dead is mine." And that voice became the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for all who once thought their lives were already given.